It's not about the software and about the hardware, it's about the data behind those solutions. If you use the data at the proper way, you can install the best solutions for your customer and for your colleagues.
Welcome back, everybody, to the fifth and final episode of the GoBright Vodcast. Last week, we talked about attracting and retaining talent. And today I am joined, of course, by Chris, as we already know, the commercial director at GoBright, who will share with us his expertise on smart workplace solutions today. And by Hans de Blois from Epatra, a company founded 22 years ago. And today he will share with us his vision on smart tech and how it affects the workplace and how it might even improve the workplace experience. So before we get into the subject, Hans, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and about what your expertise really is, your experience.
Of course. Thanks for the invite. My name is Hans. Started 22 years ago as a joke. And at this moment, we are the first and the only smart office distributor in Europe. I'm 45 years old. I like to cook. I like to play golf. I like to have a good conversation with Chris, for instance. So that's me.
Nice. That sounds great. You already, before we started recording, talked a bit about how you also like cooking. Maybe that will come up in this episode. Maybe it won't, but it is very nice to know. So I think we can first start with the what and then go a bit more over to the how and the why of smart technology. Because you just mentioned you work for a large distributor of smart technology. I believe mainly focused on office spaces, right? On the business market. So let's start with what. So what kind of hardware, what kind of software? And I want to kick that off with a statement. And that statement is smart tech can overcomplicate an office experience. Hans, what would you respond to that? Is that true? Is that not true?
Good question. And I think you're right. And what we learned from the past, for instance, the COVID period, that people bought something. And that something could help, but if they use it at the proper way, if they install it at the proper way. And the last 2 years, we experienced that we get a lot of questions. Hey guys, can you please help? Can you please consult? Because we bought something and it doesn't work. It doesn't fit in our needs. And that is maybe the biggest problem we see in the market. There's a lot of technology, a lot of hardware people buy because of it's a well-known brand, it's a well-known product, but how to use, how to combine with, that's a big topic, and that's something we need to do. We need to help the customers solving those problems.
Right. So what you mentioned is during the pandemic, people might have, or companies might have invested in different hardware, different software, maybe just out of a response, like they quickly needed to adapt to the new situation. But now they find out that it's not like fitting for their company. It doesn't fit their brand. It doesn't fit the way they work. Do you have an example of that maybe? Is there like a specific thing that you in your years of experience that you found that people might use the wrong way or when they find the right way, they can have a lot more value from it?
Yes, they buy a Logitech video bar because they want to have a video call and they don't have the experience how to use it in combination with Microsoft Teams or Zoom or WebEx, and people asking for other products or other solutions. And what we see is, for instance, that the desk is the new meeting room, and they thought the meeting room needs to be installed or equipped with products. But a lot of people come to the office and work behind their desk and not in the meeting room. So they need to have other products.
Right. So they have a nice fancy Logitech video bar up in a meeting room, but people end up using their laptop at their desk.
Yeah. Right. There's more technology on the desk than in the meeting room. Right.
Yeah, that sounds like a big misser if that was my company. Then I see no one using that video bar. There's definitely a big misser, I would say. What would you say, which hardware, software, and it doesn't have to be a specific brand or specific product, but it can be a product category, product type, do you think improves the office space the most nowadays in your experience? What do you see used the most or improved the most?
I think if you use Microsoft Teams as a platform and combine it with the right tools of software and hardware, it could be your best solution. But it's a European standard, and in the US we see that Google is the standard. Or Zoom maybe. But I think if you use Microsoft as a platform with the right tools, as I said, with GoBright or a Logitech or a Barco or a Mago, those kind of tools, it could help you for the right standard.
Right. It's a combination, is what you say.
It's always a combination between hardware and software. And people thought, when I buy the right hardware, I solve my problems.
Right.
And that were questions from IT or the facility desk. But what we see is that more and more people from HR and from real estate are involved in the process because they have a need of other solutions.
Right. Okay. Chris, of course, at GoBright, you offer smart workplace solutions, mainly software. Would you say that you see something similar where if you combine your product with the right other hardware, other software, it can improve that workplace experience even more? Or how would you say that works?
Yeah, I think absolutely. But I'd like to go back to your first question about the overcomplicating.
Yeah,
I think that a lot of products are designed not specifically from a user perspective, that it necessarily needs to be easy to use and intuitive, for example, but more from a technical perspective. Hey, look how well it integrates with product A and product B or solution C, whatever. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you put a solution like that in your office and people come in because they do office work and they're not have a technical background, it may be complicated for them to use the solutions.
Right.
So that will be my answer to your first question. And that clinks into the second one, because we at GoBright always start from a user perspective, because even software can be very complicating. I was last week I was in the supermarket going to a self-scan register to pay for my groceries. And I had a bag of buns. So I go to the buns and then I had to type in which ones I had. And then I want to go to pay. It seems very logical, right? No, I had to go back to the main screen, and from the main screen I could go to pay.
Right.
Well, these are the things that I'm thinking, how is it possible? You know? So even in software, you should always, for our opinion, start from a user perspective, because if it's easy to use or intuitive, or you don't have to think about it, then you probably will use it because you see your benefit from it.
Right.
And I think that went wrong, especially during COVID, like Hans said. A lot of new products were invented, a lot of new products were needed, but people did not necessarily know how it worked. And because of the fact that everybody thought, hey, we will go back in 2 weeks, so we have to do it in 2 weeks and then it should be installed, a whole lot of stuff went wrong.
Right.
So now we come in with the software, for example, and then the thing is that we not talk to people who start from a clean sheet. They already have rubbish in.
Right.
So we first have to get the rubbish out, and then we have to get the new stuff in. So it's even more complicated. So I can understand that it's a big hurdle for people if they realize that it should be different. I think everybody who's changing his office at the moment is feeling that they should do it differently than they did it in the past. But they not necessarily know how. And that's a quite interesting phase, I guess, for the whole industry that we're in together, to make sure that we make the difference for people.
Right.
I think you're right, Chris, because what we have seen in the past is that a lot of integrators have sold products to end users from a technical perspective.
Yeah.
So, for instance, you need to have 4K, or you need to have Full HD, or you need to have the high standard, but it's not what they need. And now the end user is asking, hey, you have installed this product, but it's not what we need. We need to solve this problem. You need to help me to understand my people, instead of solving a solution and selling some hardware in a meeting room. It's totally different approach, totally different need in the market.
Right. Do you recognize what Chris is saying in your job as well, where you talk to clients who might already have certain things installed that, well, as Chris put it so succinctly, are rubbish actually, or the combination is rubbish for that client, and you have to start with a clean sheet or maybe reinvent the wheel for them, or are people already kind of on a standard?
Yeah, Chris is right. And a lot of resellers are asking us, can you please join me at a meeting to give the right advice and good consult, because we don't know how to solve.
Yep.
And they never had a meeting with an HR or a real estate manager, because their questions are totally different.
Yeah.
And we need to help them understand those questions and solving their problem with hardware and software. So that's the reason we think of and we focus on a smart office ecosystem, then creating solutions that fits the need of the end user and then selling a product.
Right.
It's a totally different approach. Yeah.
Right.
And the funny thing is you still need both, right? You still need hardware and software. It's in cars exactly the same. Yeah. But what changed, I guess, is that you mentioned the 4K and all kinds of specifications, which mainly clings to screens, which is one of the most interesting topics for people who used to sell hardware in the past. So the standard was driven by hardware specifications. And I think today it's the other way around. I think the standard is driven by software specifications, which needs hardware to make it visible, of course. So, for example, the impact of Microsoft in general within offices is huge. It's way bigger than Zoom or whatever, or Google, which is coming a little bit. But I think that Microsoft dominates that world, for an example. And then from there, you start looking around, okay, how could I add solutions to it so that it's a great office experience, just to say so. Mm-hmm. While in the past, you just looked the other way around and said, hey, I have a screen and I have some other stuff and let's make a good thing out of it. And if it doesn't work together, then we buy or create some software to make it talk to one another. So that's a big change now. And it actually gives a lot of freedom to people who are looking now in how to start and how to create a good office environment, because it's way more easy to start with a software solution and the hardware can just adapt into it.
Right.
So, yeah, it's actually good news.
So the main question is, are your teams certified or can you integrate in Microsoft Teams?
Right.
That's the question we get daily.
Right, because people want something that is like certified, works with Microsoft Teams, because that's like their sort of like the core of their software experience.
That's the platform, that's the standard. They know how to use or how to book or how to handle. And we don't have to explain how Teams work. Mm-hmm. And if you create a separate environment or a separate platform, it's difficult to understand and to learn to the people how to use.
Yep. That makes sense. I can also imagine that post-COVID, post-pandemic, like you mentioned, Chris, everything is more software first than hardware first. Like you need that combination, but because we move to a more digital work environment, it almost naturally becomes more software focused. Like you also just mentioned, Hans, where you have maybe like a very fancy webcam up in a meeting room for people to have 4K video calls, but they end up using the full HD or maybe even lower resolution webcam in their laptops because it just feels more natural to them. It's the core of their experience. It starts at the laptop, I would say. All right, so smart technology, it's used in the office space. It's used, I would say, also in hybrid working. People use mobile devices like laptops, like smartphones, tablets to communicate with one another. How do I make sure that I combine the right soft and hardware to improve that office experience or to improve that workplace experience? Hans, what do I need to pay attention to is what I'm asking.
Good question again. As I said, for instance, a lot of people asking, are your team certified? Or can we combine those hardware products with a software solution? An example is when you buy a desk, it needs to be high adjustable. That's the question of a lot of HR managers. But we need to focus on the software, for instance, the GoBright platform. But how can we use the software to lift the desk? So we need to connect the software to the motor of the desk. So you need to work together to solve the problem.
Right.
And in the past, people say, hey, here's the desk. You can push the button to lift, but that's not solving the problem. Because they want to have it integrated in their software. They need to book the desk. And every desk needs to be at a different height, different level.
Right, right. So again, using different implementations of hardware into software to make sure that those two talk to each other so that people can book the desk, know how it works, maybe even know which desks are height adjustable and which aren't. This is very information driven, I would say.
Absolutely. And that's maybe the main topic. Is not about the software and about the hardware. It's about the data behind those solutions. If you use the data at the proper way, you can install the best solutions for your customer and for your colleagues.
Right, right. Is that also something that, because we talked about this before in a previous episode as well, with Chris about how data is very valuable in improving an office experience. Could you reiterate maybe, Chris, what kind of data would you use at GoBright, for example, or with your clients to improve their office experience? What kind of data are we talking about here?
The main one is occupancy data.
Right.
How many people are in the building? How often are the desks used? How often are the meeting room used, for example, and with how many people? Because if you know those occupancy rates, you can decide what you should change about your office space. And just one simple thing, if you think that 50% of your people is coming back to the office, which is here in the Netherlands quite high actually. If you look in the UK or in the US is maybe 10% of the people is coming back to the office and the rest is still working from home. You don't need as much office space as you have today. That's just a general thought. But okay, if we accept that, how do we know for sure? And if 50% is coming back, should we decline 50% of a space, or could we decline maybe 60 or 70%?
Right.
Well, to make those choices, you need occupancy data. You need to know exactly what percentage of your desks are used, and et cetera, for all your other assets, parking spaces and stuff. And that's what we do, for example, with data. The other thing is that with data, we could also lighten up the desks at the end of the day, which has been used, and which ones are off, which are not used.
Right.
Imagine how much that saves you on cleaning at the end of the day. If a cleaning staff comes to a floor and there are 100 desks and only 10 are lit, then you only have to clean 10 of them and you can go to the next floor.
Yeah.
So these kinds of savings and insights are driven by data. And another thing which is quite important if you talk to larger organizations, if they have, let's say 100, 200 meeting rooms, and they have all kinds of hardware in those meeting rooms, they want to make sure that they can do maintenance from a distance. Mm-hmm. So they want to have a tool, and that's software, which shows them all their hardware. That shows the status of the product, if it's connected, if it's working, et cetera, So having the hardware is one, but being able to maintain it the correct way, you add software to it to make sure that you can, watch the hardware from a distance and see how it's working. Yeah. And this is tremendously important to make sure that in these large and tall buildings where so many people are working around, that it's actually there. When you book the desk, for example, and you attend the desk, then it's nice that there's the monitors and the keypad, And if it's missing, then you have a problem.
Yep.
These are big topics for larger organizations. How do we get this all in place?
Yep.
That's why we develop, for example, software tools for that. So you can just report. If you're somewhere in the building and something is missing, you just report. And you do it just in your app. It's very intuitive. You don't need to do much for that. But in that case, you make sure that the people who are responsible for the maintenance in the building can do it as quick as possible. And these are very simple tools, which are very near to the people, to the users, but gives a lot of information to the maintenance of the building. Well, and that has to cooperate together, and that's done by software.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So maintenance, knowing which hardware is where, again, very data driven, but the way you described it, it definitely improves workplace experience, right? Yep. If you can bring down the number of things that are missing or not working, of course, that makes it a whole lot easier. Hans, are there, in your experience, other ways that this data driven solution or problem solving, I should say, improves the workplace experience? Would you say?
Yes, because what we also see is that a younger generation expect other things at the office. They want to have fun. They want to see their colleagues. They want to have an other kind of meeting. So if you use the data at the right way, you can give the younger generation also what they need. And maybe we forgot them in the pandemic period, but they come to the office and have other needs and other questions for us. And we need to redesign the office, not because of them, but the way of working is different.
Right.
And we need to agree and we need to accept.
Right. Yeah. And what every person's need is then would be data driven, if I understand correctly.
Yeah.
Another thing which is quite interesting on data is if you apply sensors, and that's hardware again. So this is also where it cuts both ways. If you attach sensors in your meeting room, for example, then it tells you something about how the room has been used. That's right. Also something about you were looking for. For example, if I don't use sensors, the only occupancy data I have of the meeting rooms are linked to the bookings that have been made. Mm-hmm. So let's say 60% of the time the meeting room is booked. I dare to say that a meeting room is much more used than 60%. Because the behavior of people is if they want to make a private call, they just walk into a meeting room, they just sit there for, let's say, 20 minutes. It's still occupant, you know? So if you don't have a sensor, you don't have that data. If you put in a sensor that's adding hardware to the solution, then you see that the occupancy rate is actually higher than only the bookings. So that's where those two worlds of hardware and software meet again, and also gives you more detailed insights on the data.
Right. Yeah.
We use those sensors also for the parking place or for the desk. And that's also why real estate is involved in those processes, because if I can save parking space at, for instance, Amsterdam Airport, or
if they can save on parking space in general, which costs a lot of money, that's a huge cost reduction.
Yeah, then I'm really important for the real estate manager.
Yeah.
And not only for IT, not only for facility management, but also for, as I said, the real estate and HR, because you're solving their problems.
Yeah. I was last week in the UK, and we have a customer over there who has 12,000 employees. They suffered to get those people back to the office. Once they started doing parking space management with the GoBright solutions, and people were now able to book a parking space, all of a sudden the people that will come back to the office, they raised tremendously.
Wow.
Because they it seems now that their office experience day was linked to having a parking space. It sounds very corny, but these are the things that are changing and that we can see now in data by adjusting the things you always did one way to change it to another way.
So it's also important to present the data to new customers, to explain to them, if you use those kind of platforms, those kind of software tools, we can solve your problems. We can help you at a different way, instead of buying a product and you think you solve the problem.
Yep.
So presenting the data, helping people with the right consult to solve their problems, it's a change in the market instead of selling the hardware.
Yeah.
Right. So I feel like you sell a solution and not just a piece of hardware or a piece of software. You have to combine those two, from what I understand. And it can be something that maybe sounds way too easy. So it's like the parking space is the issue. But your data and your software shows that can actually solve a huge problem for a company. Yeah. Is making that experience better. I remember in another episode you mentioned, Chris, that going to the office in this sort of like new environment, or the way we do it now, feels more like a planned activity. So before going to the office Monday to Friday was just a daily thing. So you knew there could be an issue with parking. That was just part of your job. You struggled a bit with it, but you dealt with it. But now, since it's such a conscious decision, I can imagine parking can be a big reason to be like, well, you know what, I'll just work from home because I don't want to deal with having to find a parking space for 30 minutes or something.
Yeah. Fully agree.
It stresses people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was in another organization also in the UK. It was very funny. I came in the building, and a lot of organizations, they made a square on the first floor where you enter and you get a great coffee, there's a restaurant, etc., etc. That's quite nice, but if everybody comes in at the same time in the morning, it's also very crowded. So a lot of these young people, they went across the street, they went to the Costa or another coffee brand, and they came all in with filled cups. So the funny thing is, what's happening here? You know, did we thought about this? How would this evolve in the coming time? Because running a restaurant internally is very expensive. Well, if you see that 80% of the people coming in with a takeaway coffee from across the street, wow. So again, and I said this in another podcast, we're not there yet. You know, we're in a journey together, inventing the new ways of working post COVID. We all accept that we have to change the office, not only about cost saving, but also to keep the people in and to make sure it's a great experience, because otherwise they will go to work somewhere else. And that's a process for the long time, and it will change constantly. And that's why you need flexible partners. Like Hans said, that's why you need to work together as hardware and software vendors, because you need one another. To constantly focus on what's needed and how can we adapt to that. Yep. And I do believe in that very, very often, and say, yeah, that's important, because there are different business models behind it. Instead of just pushing your hardware into the market because your factory run it, and you need Black Friday to make sure you sell it, otherwise your warehouse keeps full. You know.
Yep.
Yeah.
If I can forecast catering, I can help the facility management to save costs.
Right.
And I can only do it by using the right software tool. We're managing, I want to have coffee, I want to have a sandwich, and I can book it up front. So we know exactly what we need to have.
Yeah, great example.
Those kind of examples help people to invest in those kind of platforms and ecosystems, because you're solving a problem for them and saving costs.
Yep. Yeah. And again, that could improve workplace experience, because the catering is fulfilling the needs of everyone in the office space, I would say, because of the forecasting you do, which I assume again is very data driven in order to do.
And in the past, I was talking about displays, projectors, full HD, all kind of technical specifications. Mm-hmm. And when I have a meeting right now with one of my customers, they are wondering, what are you doing? Why are you changing? Why are you talking about those kind of topics? And the people who understand, we've seen growing really fast.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Is that actually a question you ask? So when a client comes to you, is one of the big questions why? Why do you want change? Why do you implement these new things? Is that important to know?
Yeah. The last years, I really need to explain why are we doing those things. And I also need to explain to my resellers why they need to change. Because the world has changed. Mm. Younger generation come up. They have another need for the office, for the funding, for a lot of topics.
Right.
So we really need to understand that it's changed, and we need to accept.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think this is a nice segue into the second half of the podcast, where we will be talking about the implementation of this, because now, of course, we talked about different types of hard and software and how you combine them, making sure it's data driven. But I can imagine as well that there might be managers listening to this wondering, what does this implementation process look like? How long does it take? Is it complicated? Will it be a huge upfront investment? And of course, how will it affect the workplace experience in a positive way, hopefully? Again, I want to start with a statement, Hans. Implementing smart technology in your office space is a long process. Is that true by definition?
No, I think it's a different process. Because in the past, when you buy AV equipment, you sign, you pay, and there will be a Makita team who install all the products in your meeting room. And if they are really good, they give you a training and that's it. But for a consult for a smart office, it's totally different. The approach is different. You first need to know what kind of problems do we need to solve for you. What kind of topics are really important for you. And after that, we create a solution, selecting products, installing the products, training people, working at the office together with the people, and then they accept the different way of working.
Right. So again, much more solution-based as opposed to picking one certain package of hard and software and then just installing it. And like you said, maybe get like a training if they're really good. But how do I, as a manager, figure out what my problem is? Because I must say that I can imagine people, they know they need to improve their office space. They know that there's a lot of smart technology out there that could improve their office space. But I can imagine it can be difficult to articulate what the problem is or what the challenge is that people's employees might run into. Do you have any advice on that? Like how do they make sure that they find the right problem so they can present it to you and the resellers in the right way, so you offer the right solution? How would you say?
Good question. What we can do, we can work a day at their office and present them what we see. Present them what we hear. Present them what we think it needs to be changed because of listening to the people who are working there, seeing what people do when they walk through the building. And that's the first easy step. It's quite easy. Looking around, see what's going on.
Right. Very, very observant. So,
Can I comment to that?
Sure, of course.
I think it's a very, very relevant question because most of the organizations who start to look in smart office technology, they do that for the first time.
Right.
So they just don't know how. You know, if you change something else like your printers or your coffee machine, you've done that 20 times. So you know what to look at. If you make an RFP or an RFQ, for example, you know exactly what to write down and what answers you like to have. Let's get back to the example of the meeting room. If you say, hey, we need a screen in the meeting room so we can communicate and we can write on it, yeah, that's quite easy. And then all of a sudden, it's about the specs of the hardware, and then we make it a standard for every meeting room, right? So if you have 50 meeting rooms, we put everywhere the same screen, bam, it's all the same. If you look into smart office software, for example, like we do, it's not one size fits all. You know, so it could be on the 4th floor that they work totally different than on the 2nd floor. So if you still use the same product, but you can turn the buttons while it's used differently, then you're much more flexible. So the first question is always, which I ask to customers, what do you want to be the user experience? So if I come to the office today, I enter the building, what's the journey? What should one of your employees, what should they experience through the whole day and what do they need? And if we can write that down, it's very easy to adjust the software to that.
Right.
So it's a total different way of thinking than only from what we did with transactional business in the past.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's really starting with the journey of the employees within the building. And if you can define that, then it's quite easy to adjust the software to it.
Right. So if I understand correctly, what you mentioned, a big part of it is observing, going into that office for a day, and just because I can imagine you look, for one, you're an outsider, you don't work there, so you're not used to everything. So I think that gives a fresh perspective. And of course, also you guys are the experts. So I'm assuming you use a different pair of glasses to look at the environment than someone who's a manager there for 15, 16 years. And you report back to them so they know what's going on, and then you can help them solve those issues. But what you're mentioning as well, Chris, is that it's also from the managers themselves a perspective thing. So not looking at the office as a place where there's different hardware that you can buy, where you can have a transaction with a reseller, but looking at what is the experience for someone coming in. basically.
Yeah.
So there's no standard. And that's maybe the main topic. There's no standard, and we need to create it together.
Right. Yeah. So there's no one size fits all, basically.
No.
Exactly. Build that in. Nice. All right. That makes a lot of sense. I think that's also a good starting point for a lot of managers is knowing what's going on and using help from different experts to find out what's going on. What about the office space itself? Is there specific ways that I can prepare it for the new, I would say, the new age where we have that smart technology? Is there things that you would say are important to change? And it can be very literal, pragmatic things. It could also be just in the way you look at the office, or how do I prepare the office space?
I think the office space is changing because, as I said, the desk is the new meeting room. So when 10 of my people having a Teams call behind their desk, it's quite noisy. So you need to think, how do I redesign the office that's workable for everyone? So a phone booth or a silence room or a small meeting room where I can have an easy phone call or a short phone call, that's really important, instead of having another big meeting room.
Right.
Those kind of things are changing.
Right. Right. So again, very, very much the perspective of how you look at the office then.
Yeah.
That's the best way to prepare it. Are there any specific like physical changes I should make to my office space, or is that all you and the resellers that do that?
We can help, we can advise, we can consult, but at the end you need to do it by yourself. You need to make the decision by yourself. The only thing what we can do is advice. And saying, hey, if you invest in those kind of platforms, those kind of tools, it could help you. But if you don't use it the proper way, in the end.
Yeah. It's the fifth podcast, like you said, when we started. And if you look to the other four, you get a lot of answers. Mm-hmm. It sounds corny, but we had somebody who was experienced in the hybrid working. We had somebody who was experienced in telling you what the ROI of your investment is when you go to a smart office technology. Mm-hmm. We had people coming in telling about how to acquire young talent, for example, in this area.
Yeah.
So if you add this all, you start to see that it's not about only hardware, or only about software, or only about having a great office experience. It should all fit. If you want to become the employer where people love to work.
Yeah.
So that you acquire right talent, you need a good office for that. To have a good office, you need silent areas, etc., etc. It all touches base to one another.
Right.
And that's what I love about the experts that we got in, because they all share a piece of the pie, and we all need one another to make sure that we get the best experience for the customers.
Right.
And that's the position also where GoBright wants to be. Not that we necessarily want to sell everything to everybody like we did 20 years ago. Oh, we can do everything for you. Just tell us what you need and we arrange everything for you. I don't believe in that concept anymore. I believe in the fact that we work together with strong partners, which are certified or preferred or whatsoever, so that we have a good ecosystem based on testimonies of customers who are already satisfied and say, hey, look what we did. Just follow our example, you know. And if you do, our experience with these guys is good. So this is how we do it. And I see that works very good.
Right.
So that also changed, for example, how you go to exhibitions, how you show what you can do for that part. And if people want to know how they can change their office, I can recommend them to go to Orgatech in Germany, for example, next year. That's a big exhibition on people who make office furniture or all kinds of materials which you use in your office to make it a great experience. And it's actually, if you look at it from that perspective, a very that's a difficult word. Revolutionary,
there it is.
Business, because they start to make fabrics from plastics, for example, from used plastics. So it's just one example. It's all about circular economy, which is using products for the second or the third time.
Yep.
Circular
economy. Yep.
And that's also quite interesting because that's good for the environment. So you see that there's all these world topics are coming down together to the agreement of Paris, because every office building in 2050 should be CO2 neutral. So how do we do that? So also there is a big thing changing. So all the big building companies who build buildings, they already know how to do that with the world standards and certifications. They need sensors in the building to measure it. Otherwise, you don't know if your building is CO2 neutral.
Yep.
And that's where the journey starts. So either your existing building should be changed, or a new one should be according to the new regulations, and then the experience in the building should be great.
Right.
So it's a real big issue which is going all over the world. We're all in the same ship, and we need each other to get it done.
Yep.
So yeah.
And in the past, we had different expertise. So the IT, the office furniture, the facility management, the building experts, totally different approach. And what we now see is that they are working together to solve all those kind of problems.
Yeah.
And they need to work together, and it helps customers to watch those kind of podcasts, because then we can learn from each other. And we need each other to change the market, because it's really important at this moment. And we cannot do it by ourselves alone.
Right. I fully agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. My final question for you two gentlemen, we've talked about smart technology, the what, we've talked about how you can prepare the office space itself. But of course, at the heart of it all is the employees, the people that come in once, twice, 3, 4 times a week to that office space. It's going to change. Their smart technology will be implemented for them. So their experience is going to change as well. How do you prepare those employees to make sure that their experience is actually better after you've implemented the smart technology? How would you say that works, Hans?
Ask them what they need and use their knowledge in the process. That's, I think, really important, to make them part of the journey, make them part of the change, make them part of the decision. Because they have the knowledge, and if you don't use it the right way, you're making a mistake.
Right. You need to know what's going on with them first, I would say. Okay.
Yeah, and that links into your office culture in the end, I guess. If you have a culture of sharing and listening and talking to one another, then it won't be that hard. If your culture is still a little bit older, via hierarchical, for example, then it's top-down driven. And then it becomes way more complicated to understand what your people need. But, well, that's also a big thing. But doing a survey internally, for example, will help to get insights. Pay some visits to competitors or people in the market look at their office. Right. Yesterday on LinkedIn, I saw TomTom in Amsterdam. They redecorated their office, for example, and they made a movie of it and they showed it. So you can see actually how they've done it, how they welcome the people in with a breakfast, for example, give them a tour. That's actually quite good, because then you can explain what you've changed. You don't have to tell people about an app, because people install apps on their private phones daily. Just to say so, and nobody explains to them how the app is used.
Sure.
So my opinion is that if you install a Teams app or the GoBright app or whatsoever, you just know in 10 minutes how to use it, because you're used to find out yourself. But to understand the concept behind it and the rules of engagement, how do we use this building together in a general way, except from what you do yourself? You have to explain what the vision is about. Okay, how do we work in this building? What's normal? So you don't put your coat on a chair, but you stow it away in a locker, for example. That's a rule of engagement. So that means if we see that you still put your coat on your chair, we're allowed to tell you, please, can you put it in a locker?
Yeah.
That's something you don't learn from an app. That's something you have to tell your people.
Sure.
How they can do it, they know, because they can see how it works with all the lights. They have an app which empowers them to do it.
Sure.
So these rules of engagement should be very firm, and you should know what you want. That links back to what I said, what should be the customer journey. And we cannot do that alone. That's why we have distributors who have consultants, for example, who also help our resellers to give the right advice to the customers.
I fully agree. And what we learned is that we need to take the end users to other end users who already use the solution. Not going to showrooms and showing how fancy everything is. Go to an end user who already use and ask them, hey, how do you use it? Can you explain what's different, what is difficult? And that helps us, that helps the reseller, that helps the whole channel to understand smart offices.
So what are your main customers looking at the moment?
Good question. In the past, it was a projector or a display because I want to present something. And now it's different because what we see, the last 3 years, they bought video conferencing products and they use it as a tool to communicate with people at home or at a distance.
Or present online.
Present, yeah. Mm-hmm. And what we see right now is that they are looking for signage software because when people come to the office, they want to present the company or details or figures or whatever. So signage software is getting more and more important to inform the customers or inform the people who are at the office at that moment. The second one is desk booking solutions and sensors, as Chris already mentioned, because what we see is that the office space changed, and when they are at the office, they need to have a desk. And a meeting room, booking a meeting room, they already familiar with, and now they are looking for desk booking solutions. So the first one, as I said, is the signage. The second one is desk booking, and in the end, of course, the room booking, and in the end, the hardware to solve those kind of questions.
Right. As we do with every episode, we want to end the episode with 3 tips. One from Hans, one from Chris, and one from me. So Hans, if I can start with you.
My tip would be join a reseller or join a distributor in a meeting with an end user who already use or implementate the complete smart office solution, and ask the people who use it for the advantages instead of going to a showroom or looking at a website. Go to the end user who already use it. That would be my advice.
All right. Chris?
Yeah, it's a bit in the same area. If I look to mainstream competitors of GoBright, they sell their products directly to the end customer. In our case, we deliberately chose to do it via the classical channel of distributors and resellers. Those resellers you can find in the office furniture industry, in the ICT industry, and also in the AV integrators industry. The reason why we did that is because those people have so much expertise that they can easily see it from a broader perspective. But there's also not all of those selling partners have changed their way of thinking yet. So it could be if you have an AV integrator who integrated all your meeting rooms, that they're still very transactional oriented and hardware oriented. So maybe it's time then to find out if there is another one in your area from one of those 3 branches I just mentioned who can help you to the next level. Who, like Hans said, has experience, done it before, know how to work with license subscription software, for example, because it's not a transactional business anymore. And that will lift your view on buying your solutions also to a different level. So you need to look at the partners who help you if they are ready for it. So, and that will give you more insights. That would be my tip.
Great. My tip would be from this conversation, what I understand is that you need to look at the problem and find out what the problem is that your employees have, that you as a manager have, that your office space might have. Make sure that that is data driven, because then you can be solution oriented once you start talking to GoBright or Epatra in the future. Well, thank you very much, Hans. Thank you very much, Chris. And thank you for listening to this final episode of the GoBright podcast. This episode is part of a larger series called Shaping the Human Office. And there's 4 other episodes that you can watch right now on YouTube and on the GoBright Spotify.